My wife raised her glass at my retirement supper and told 30 relatives I had left our son an orchard, but refused to teach him how to keep it alive. Then Caleb pushed my pruning notebook back across the table and asked her to explain what she had promised him in his car. I set the notebook down before it could slide into my plate. "Caleb," I said, "is that what you told your mother?" That was the first useful thing anyone did after Diane stood up. It was not a defense. It was a question. And it belonged to the only other person whose life she had just described. Caleb looked at me, then at the gold paper banner Diane had hung over the windows. "Happy retirement, Eli." Beneath it, she had taped a smaller card in her careful handwriting. "Hail Orchard, the next generation." He was 32 years old. He had dirt on one cuff from helping me move 2 crates that afternoon and a blue anatomy workbook in his car. I knew about the dirt. I did not yet know enough about the book. "No," he said. "That isn't what I told her." The room changed, but not in the satisfying way people sometimes imagine truth changes a room. Nobody gasped. My brother lowered his fork. A cousin stopped smiling. Diane remained standing with her glass held at the height of her shoulder, as though the toast might still continue if we all behaved. Caleb put one palm on the notebook. "Mom," he said, "tell them what I asked you to keep private for 1 week." To understand why that question frightened her more than my anger would have, I have to go back to December, when there were no leaves on our 20 apple trees and retirement was still a practical word. Hale Orchard was a grand name for a small family planting. 8 old standard trees stood on the north slope, planted by my father and uncles before Diane and I were married. 12 smaller trees ran in 2 rows nearer the house. We sold a little fruit from a roadside table, but we were not commercial growers. Most years, the apples went into boxes for relatives, jars Diane labeled in green ink, and one harvest supper that had grown larger than either of us ever planned. I had maintained those trees for 37 years while working full-time as a building maintenance supervisor at the county library. The orchard never paid a salary. It did, however, ask for something in every season. In March, there was pruning. In late spring, there was watching for trouble and making sure the young trees had enough water. In early summer, there was thinning, which meant removing some small fruit so the branches were not asked to carry more than they could support. Then harvest came, followed by cleanup before winter. At 64, none of those jobs was impossible for me. Taken together, they had begun to shape every week I was supposed to be retiring into. One December evening, I spread a sheet of paper on the kitchen table. I had drawn 3 columns: reduce, hire, teach. Diane read them twice. "Reduce what?" "The work." "You mean the orchard." "I mean the work." That distinction mattered to me. It did not matter to her yet. I told her I wanted to stop handling the mature north block by myself. I could keep the 12 smaller trees with occasional help. We could pay the Moreno crew for the heavier days. We could invite family members to learn particular tasks if they wanted, but I did not want another season built on the assumption that our relatives would appear whenever we wrote their names on a calendar. Diane picked up the pencil and circled teach. "Caleb can take it. Caleb can choose to learn. You always say things that make family sound optional. Work is optional when nobody is being paid." She pushed back from the table. Diane had spent nearly as many years making the harvest feel like a family tradition as I had spent tending the trees. She planned the supper, remembered who could not eat walnuts, saved the wide-mouthed jars for my sister, and called cousins who would otherwise have drifted into exchanging Christmas cards and nothing more. When I said I wanted fewer trees, she heard fewer people. I understood that later. At the time, I only understood that she had circled our son's name without asking him. Caleb had left a canvas jacket over a kitchen chair 2 days earlier. Diane lifted it to hang it in the mudroom, and a folded page slipped from the pocket. Across the top were the words, "Respiratory Therapy Program, Course Sequence." I saw the heading before Diane folded the page smaller. Is Caleb thinking about school? I asked. He looks at things. That looks fairly specific. It is a course list, Eli, not a declaration. She put it in the kitchen drawer where we kept spare keys and takeout menus. I assumed she would return it the next time he came by. I did not ask more. Caleb had worked several jobs since community college. For the previous 2 years, he had scheduled deliveries for a medical supply company. He was steady, but he had never spoken of his job with affection. If he wanted to study something new, I wanted him to tell me in his own time. Diane tapped the circled word on my paper. Let me ask him the right way. I almost smiled. What is the wrong way? She did not answer. In January, I called Rosa Moreno. Rosa and her brother Mateo maintained 2 small orchards and several large gardens around Larkspur Bend. 3 years earlier, when I injured my wrist moving a library shelf, they had pruned the north block while I stood below in a brace and tried not to tell them how to do their jobs. I still remembered Rosa handing me the invoice and saying, "Your trees will survive being cared for by somebody else." We walked the rows on a gray morning. Rosa tied orange tape around 2 damaged limbs and listened while I explained what I wanted. Not gone, I said, manageable. She nodded toward the mature trees. Those 8 take most of your ladder work and nearly all the hauling. That is what my shoulders have been telling me. She gave me an estimate for 2 crew days, one in early summer and one near harvest, with an option to add pruning the following year. I had already set aside part of my retirement payout for help around the property. The amount did not thrill me. Neither did the thought of turning my son into unpaid equipment because I was too proud to hire people. I signed the estimate. When Rosa left, Caleb's truck came up the drive. He got out wearing gloves too clean for orchard work. "Mom said you were doing the last pruning before I take over," he said. I looked toward the house. Diane was standing behind the kitchen window with her phone raised. "Did she?" Caleb followed my eyes and gave a tired little shake of his head. "Can you show me one?" he asked. We walked to a younger tree near the south fence. I showed him how I looked for a damaged branch and how I avoided making cuts simply because a tree looked untidy. He listened well. Caleb had always listened well when the lesson had a clear end. Before I handed him the saw, he asked, "If I learn this today, are we going to be talking about next year all morning?" "No." "Does it mean I agreed to anything?" "It means you are cutting one branch on a Saturday." He studied me as though checking for a trap. "Mom says you think I am not committed enough." "I think commitment requires a person to commit." That answer relaxed him. He made one careful cut. It was not perfect, but it was patient, and the branch came away cleanly. Diane took a picture from the porch. That afternoon, she sent it to the family group with the caption, "Passing it on." Caleb did not reply. Neither did I. That was the first place I could have stopped what followed more firmly. I could have written, "This was one lesson, not a succession." Instead, I told myself everyone knew Diane liked a warm caption. I mistook a public claim for enthusiasm because challenging it would have made the day uncomfortable. Caleb had made the same kind of bargain, though I did not know it yet. A week later, Diane carried 2 of my orchard binders to his apartment. I went along because he had invited us for coffee. On his table sat an anatomy workbook, a stack of index cards, and a printout with hospital classrooms listed down one side. "You are studying," I said. Caleb placed a mug over one corner of the printout. "Taking prerequisites." "For the respiratory program?" His eyes moved to Diane. She said he is keeping his options open. I waited for him to correct her. He did not. Instead, Diane opened one of my binders to a page of harvest dates. "Your father has never organized these so another human can read them." "I can read them," I said. "You know what I mean. Caleb closed the binder. I have a lab on Tuesday nights. Orchard work is on weekends, she said. Sometimes I study on weekends. Sometimes everybody does things they did not schedule. The room went quiet in a way I recognized from our early marriage. Diane could make a request sound like a fact already agreed upon, and if nobody objected quickly enough, she treated the silence as a promise. I touched the anatomy book. Is this something you want? I think so. Then I hope the interview goes well. He looked surprised. How did you know there was an interview? I did not. Diane began stacking her papers. It is only an interview. On our drive home, I asked why she kept answering questions directed to Caleb. Because he freezes around you. He seemed to freeze around the binders. He is afraid you will think he is rejecting you. Has he said that? She turned toward the passenger window. You do not hear what people mean. That sentence stayed with me because it placed her between every question and every answer. If Caleb spoke, she knew what he meant. If he did not speak, she knew that too. In April, I called a family video meeting about the spring work. My plan was simple. I needed 4 people for 2 hours on one Saturday to clear pruned branches and reset guards around the younger trunks. The Moreno crew would handle the mature block later. I intended to ask, receive answers, and plan from those answers. Diane had already made a roster. She held it up to the camera before I finished explaining. Mara and James are on the first Saturday. Paul and Nita are on the second. Caleb is lead for both. My niece Mara leaned closer to her screen. I am working the first Saturday. You can come in the afternoon, Diane said. I work until 6. Diane drew a small arrow beside Mara's name, as though evening labor solved the problem. Caleb said, I never said I could lead either one. You told me weekends were better. Better than Tuesdays is not the same as available. My brother Paul laughed in the uneasy way relatives laugh when they want a disagreement to shrink. We will get it done. It is family. I should have ended the call and started again. Instead, I corrected the dates, told Mara she was not expected, and explained that paid help was already arranged for the heavy work. Diane stared at me. Paid help? Rosa and Mateo, we discussed this. You discussed the possibility. I signed an estimate. Her face changed just enough that most people missed it. Eli has decided he would rather hire strangers than let Caleb learn, she said. Rosa had known us for 15 years. Caleb had cut one branch and asked if it obligated him to next year. Both facts could have corrected Diane's sentence. I gave only the first. They are not strangers. It was too small an answer. After the call, Caleb canceled the second Saturday by text. Diane told the family he was upset because I had criticized his pruning. I learned that from Mara, who called to reassure me that Caleb was capable. I never criticized his pruning, I said. That is what Aunt Diane said. There was a time when I might have called Caleb immediately and demanded an explanation. Instead, I asked him one question by text. Did you cancel because of anything I said that morning? His answer came 5 minutes later. No, exam review. I told Mom last month. That was the first direct contradiction I could no longer call enthusiasm. I showed Diane the message. He did not want the family to think he was choosing school over us, she said. So you told them I drove him away? I gave them an explanation they could accept, at my expense. You do not care what people think. I care what my son thinks I said. She folded the roster in half. You are making this larger than it is. 2 days later, Caleb came by to return a socket set. Diane met him at the door and began describing the next workday before he had taken off his coat. He looked past her at me. Did you need me Saturday? No, I said. The work is covered. Diane turned. Covered is not the same as taught. Caleb set the socket set on the floor. I did not ask for a lesson. Your father thinks paying people is easier than depending on you. That time I did not let the sentence lie between us. "I think paying people is honest when I am assigning work," I said. "If Caleb offers a morning, that is different." Caleb nodded once, but he did not look relieved. He looked tired. I began to understand that every clear answer I gave him was followed by another conversation with Diane in which she supplied a different meaning. "I have something I need to finish first," he said. He glanced at her before adding, "Then I will talk to Dad." Diane smiled too quickly. "Of course." After he left, I asked what he needed to finish. "You heard him. He will talk when he is ready." It was the answer I wanted, and that made me distrust it. Spring came fully after that. The orchard bloomed white along the south rows, and for a week the place looked effortless. Diane took pictures. Relatives commented with apple emojis. I checked the trees in the morning and again near dusk, because beauty had never canceled work. One evening I found Diane at the kitchen table drafting invitations for my retirement supper. At the bottom she had written, "Join us as Eli passes Hale Orchard to Caleb." I laid my hand over the stack. "No, it is an invitation. It is an announcement neither of us has agreed to. You said you wanted to teach. I said teaching was one option if someone wanted it." She pulled the invitations from under my hand. "Do you know what happens if nobody takes over? The harvest supper goes away. Your father's trees go away. People stop coming. People who only come because Caleb gives up his plans are not being held by an orchard." Her eyes filled, though she did not cry. "You get to retire," she said. "What do I get?" It was the first honest question she had asked about the change. Diane had never drawn a wage from those suppers. She had drawn a place. She was the person cousins called about dates. She knew how many chairs my sister could sit in before her back hurt. She kept extra containers near the door because someone always asked to take apples to a neighbor. When I spoke of reducing the orchard, I had spoken as though all the labor under consideration belonged to me. I sat across from her. "You get a say in what we keep. You do not get Caleb's life as compensation." She wiped the corner of one eye. "He wants this. He is only afraid to tell you." "Then he can tell me, and if he cannot, then the answer is not yes." I asked her to promise there would be no succession line on the invitation and no announcement at the supper unless Caleb and I both agreed. She promised. The invitations went out without the line. I thought we had turned toward honesty. What we had done was move the pressure out of my sight. In June, the young fruit needed thinning. Diane's roster showed 9 adults arriving at 8 on Saturday. At 8:15, my brother Paul pulled in alone. Mara sent a message reminding Diane she had never agreed. Nita had believed she was listed for the following week. Caleb was taking an anatomy exam. By 9, there were 3 of us standing beneath work meant for 9 names. "They said they would come," Diane insisted. Paul looked at the roster. "You said I had said I would come." The distinction embarrassed him. It should have embarrassed Diane. Instead, she handed him a bucket. I took it back. "We are doing the south row only." "The north block cannot wait," she said. "It has a crew date." I called Rosa. Our reserve date was the following Monday, but she and Mateo had finished another job early and could give us the afternoon. I agreed. They would start the north block now and return Monday only if the work required it. When their truck arrived, Diane went inside. Caleb came after his exam, still wearing the gray shirt he used for class. He looked at the crew, then at me. "Mom said you called them because I did not show. I booked them in January." He rubbed both hands over his face. "I told her about the exam." "I know." "She said she would explain." "She did." He heard what I meant. We sat on the tailgate of my truck while Rosa and Mateo worked the mature block. For the first time, I told him plainly that I was reducing my workload. I said there would be no transfer, no inheritance announcement, and no debt attached to the morning he had spent pruning with me. "I like helping you," he said. "That is different from wanting this." "Mom does not think it is." "What do you think?" He looked toward the kitchen window. "Can I have a few days?" I wanted to say he had already had months. I wanted to say his silence had allowed my wife to put words in my mouth. Both were true. Neither would have made his next words freer. "Take a few days," I said. That evening, Diane and I had the argument we should have had in December. I told her she had turned missed work into evidence against me. She told me I had made her look foolish by hiring the Morenos. I reminded her that she had known about the estimate before the family call. "You make every problem solvable without us," she said. "Without Caleb, you mean. Without family. Family that cannot say no is labor." She stood at the sink with her back to me. "When the orchard is gone, do not pretend you were not warned. When our son stops answering, do not pretend you do not know why." I regretted the sentence as soon as I said it. It sounded like a threat, and I did not control Caleb's contact any more than she controlled his future. I apologized for that part. She did not apologize for hers. What I learned later was that Caleb had already completed his interview. His interest in respiratory care began the previous year after a friend from work spent several weeks recovering from a severe lung infection. Caleb had been impressed by the people who could explain a frightening machine without making the patient feel like a problem attached to it. He took one prerequisite at a time. He saved money. He attended an information session. Diane knew all of this before I did. She also knew when the acceptance email arrived. Caleb drove to our house on a Tuesday evening and asked her to sit with him in his car. I was at the library finishing paperwork for my replacement. He showed her the email on his phone. The program began in August. "I am telling Dad Sunday," he said. My retirement supper was the following Saturday. Diane asked him to wait until after the supper. "No," he said. "I have waited because you said he would hear it as me leaving. He does not talk like that when it is just us." She told him I was already wounded by the paid crew, that the family expected a handoff, and that one more week would let her soften the news. He refused a longer delay. He gave her 7 days because she was his mother, and because he still hoped her version of my feelings might contain something he had missed. "You do not tell him for me," he said. "You do not tell anybody the orchard is mine. Give me 1 week." She promised. Then she went inside and began writing the toast. On the morning of the supper, I found place cards arranged around our dining table. Caleb's said, "Next keeper." Mine said, "Retired keeper." The words made us sound like two ends of a transaction. I collected the cards. Diane came in carrying flowers. "Put those back." "No. People think tonight means something. It means I retired from the library. That is not why half of them are coming. Then half of them received the wrong invitation in their heads." I opened my pruning notebook to check a date Rosa had asked about. Tucked inside the front cover was the respiratory course schedule that had fallen from Caleb's jacket in December. I recognized the heading. I did not read the dates below it. "Why is this in my notebook?" Diane set the flowers down. "Caleb asked me to keep it safe." "In a book you plan to hand him in front of everyone?" "He needs a push." There are moments when a marriage changes because of something loud. Ours changed in a quiet kitchen while I held a folded course list and understood that my wife had placed our son's private plan inside the symbol she intended to use against him. I remembered Diane folding the schedule and placing it in the kitchen drawer in December. Now it was inside the notebook she meant to hand Caleb during her toast. The drawer and my study were only a few steps apart. What she intended to do with the paper had carried it much farther. "Did he ask you to announce that he is taking the orchard?" "He asked for time." "That was not my question." "He is scared." "Did he ask you?" She picked up the flowers again. "He will thank us when this settles." I put the schedule back without reading further and closed the notebook. I could have called Caleb. I could have demanded that he come early and explain. I could have photographed the page and used it to defend myself if Diane made her speech. I did none of those things. Whatever that paper meant, it was his to explain. I decided I would correct only my own actions. I had offered to teach. I had hired help because my body and my retirement required it. I had not assigned the orchard to anybody. That decision did not make me calm. It gave my anger a boundary. By 6, our house was full. Diane had replaced the place cards. I removed mine and left Caleb's where it was because he arrived while I was reaching for it. He read the words, "Next keeper." "Did you do this?" he asked me. "No." He looked at his mother. She kissed his cheek and told him not to start the evening tense. Dinner was roast chicken, potatoes, green beans, and the last jars of apple butter from the previous fall. Diane had planned every plate. I will not erase her work simply because she used the evening badly. Harm does not become clearer when we pretend the person who caused it has never done anything generous. After dessert, my brother tapped his glass. Diane stood before I could. She spoke first about my library career. She made people laugh with the story of the time I repaired the return conveyor using a part meant for a washing machine. Then her voice softened. "Eli has always loved these trees," she said. "Sometimes he has loved being needed by them so much that he forgot someone else needed to learn." The first sentence confused me. The second accused me. By the time she lifted the pruning notebook, the whole room knew which version it was supposed to believe. "He hired outsiders," she said, "and left Caleb unprepared. Tonight, we are correcting that." That was where my story began. I set down the notebook and asked Caleb whether he had told her that. He said no. Then he asked Diane to tell us what she had promised in his car. Diane's hand lowered a few inches. "This is not the time," she said. Caleb gave a short, astonished laugh. "You made it the time." My brother looked from one of them to the other. Mara pushed Diane's roster away from her plate. I said only what I had decided to say. I offered to show Caleb any work he wanted to learn. I hired Rosa and Mateo in January because 8 mature trees are more than I want to handle in retirement. Those decisions are mine. Whatever Caleb plans is his to tell. Diane turned to him. "If you stay silent now, everyone will think your father is right." That sentence did what months of gentle pressure had not. It showed Caleb that she intended to claim his silence no matter which direction it pointed. He stood. "Dad is right about one thing," he said. "My plan is mine to tell." His hands shook. He rested them on the back of his chair. "I applied to the respiratory therapy program at North Valley Technical College. I was accepted Tuesday. Classes start in August." My first feeling was pride. My second was grief that he had expected my pride to need preparation. Diane spoke quickly. "You can take classes and learn the orchard. I can help Dad sometimes. I am not taking over." "You have not even tried." "I have tried enough to know the difference between liking a morning with him and choosing this for my life." He looked at me. "Dad showed me how to prune without asking for next year. He told me the paid crew was booked before my exam. He did not refuse to teach me." Then he looked around the table. "I refuse succession." I asked Mom for 1 week to tell Dad myself because she kept saying it would break him. She promised. Instead, she wrote this. He touched the printed toast beside her plate. Diane sat down. "I was trying to keep the family together. By making him the reason I could not leave?" No one answered for her. Caleb took his phone from his pocket and opened the acceptance email. He did not pass it around. He showed me the date, then locked the screen. "This proves when I knew," he said. "It does not prove what I want. I am telling you what I want." That distinction mattered more than the email. I told him I was proud of him. He shut his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the anger was still there, but something frightened had left his face. Diane whispered. And the orchard? I could have used that moment to punish her. Several people at the table were ready to help me do it. My brother had begun gathering the printed rosters as though they were evidence for a trial. I stopped him. The orchard still needs a plan, I said. It does not need an heir tonight. I took the roster Diane had placed near the serving dishes. 9 names were written in green ink beside 4 summer dates. I drew one line through every name, including Caleb's. Rosa and Mateo are paid for the mature block, I said. I am keeping the 12 smaller trees for now. If anyone wants a specific 2-hour job, write your own name. If you do not, leave it blank. Paul stared at the paper. You will not be offended? I will plan from the answer you give. Mara took the pen first. She wrote her name beside 1 September morning and added 9 to 11 after it. Paul chose a cleanup day. 2 cousins chose harvest morning. 5 people left their names off. The blank spaces did not look like abandonment. They looked like information I could use. Diane watched the roster pass without touching it. When everyone had gone, she stood on the porch while I stacked chairs. Are you leaving me too? She asked. I retired from the library. I am reducing the orchard. Neither means I am leaving you. It feels like everything I built is being taken apart. Some of it was built from people not feeling able to say no. She flinched. I kept my voice even. I love you. I will plan this place with you, but I will not let you volunteer Caleb's life, and I will not carry messages between the 2 of you. She wanted reassurance that Caleb would forgive her. I did not give it. That answer belonged to him. The next morning, the gold banner still hung above the windows. Diane took down the smaller Next Generation card without being asked. That was not repair. It was the first accurate action after the damage. The summer did not become easy because the truth had been spoken. Caleb started classes in August. For the first month, he called me every Sunday evening and spoke mostly about oxygen flow, exams, and how much he disliked studying in groups. He did not call Diane separately. When she asked me what he had said, I told her to call him. He will not answer. Then leave one honest message. Her first message was 6 minutes long. She explained the orchard, her childhood, my retirement, and how frightened she had been. Caleb did not respond. Her second message was 20 seconds. I broke my promise and announced a future you did not choose. I am sorry. You do not have to make me feel better about it. He texted back, I heard you. That was all. Meanwhile, the trees kept their own schedule. Rosa and Mateo handled the mature north block. Their invoices arrived when expected. Paying them stung my pride less than I had predicted and helped my shoulders more. On the south rows, the volunteers who had written their own names came when they said they would. Mara arrived at 9 on the dot and left at 11. Diane started to ask her to stay for lunch and more work, then stopped. Would you like lunch before you go? She asked instead. Mara said yes to lunch and no to more work. Diane said, all right. I noticed because 6 months earlier she would have heard the yes and edited out the no. Caleb came for one harvest morning. He worked beside me for 2 hours, loaded 3 crates, and left for class. Nobody called him the next keeper. Diane handed him a sandwich for the road and did not slip a task list into the bag. We harvested fewer apples that year. The north block had been thinned carefully, but I chose not to chase every last crate. The roadside table closed a week earlier than usual. At first, Diane treated each empty shelf like proof that I had diminished us. Then harvest supper arrived. There were 18 people instead of 30. Each had answered a direct invitation. Diane had written 3 choices at the bottom: supper, brief visit, or cannot come. No explanation required. The table was smaller. The conversation was better. Caleb could not attend because of a clinical shift. Diane told the family exactly that. She did not say I had scheduled badly. She did not say he was overwhelmed. She did not offer a meaning beyond the fact he had given. After dinner, she called him herself. "Do you have 5 minutes?" she asked. I heard only her side from the kitchen. "No, I am not asking about next weekend." A pause. "All right, tomorrow then." She hung up without handing the phone to me or asking me to translate his tone. Our marriage did not reset. We had arguments about money, about how quickly to reduce the North Block, and about whether hiring help made the supper feel less like ours. The difference was that Diane could no longer settle those arguments by placing Caleb on her side. Once, in winter, she said, "Caleb thinks we should keep all 8 mature trees." I asked, "Did he tell you that?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "No," she said. "I think he would be sad if we did not." "That is your thought." "Yes." It was a small correction. It saved us an hour of fighting with his son who was not in the room. There were also corrections she did not make in time. In February, she told my sister that Caleb was too busy to attend her birthday lunch. My sister called him anyway. He was free. Diane had assumed he would want the weekend for studying. Caleb came to the lunch. Diane apologized to both of them before anyone asked her to. She did not say she had only been trying to help. On the drive home, she told me that leaving an empty space in a plan still felt like neglect. "Sometimes it is room," I said. She looked out at the bare fields. "I am trying to learn the difference." I believe she was trying. Belief did not require me to hand the calendar back. We agreed to keep the mature block for one more season with the crew doing the heavy work. After that, we would assess each tree instead of treating the whole slope as a monument. Diane kept planning the supper. I kept the right to end work at a reasonable hour. Neither of us used Caleb as the bridge between those decisions. In March, he passed his first clinical evaluation. He called me before he called Diane. "I want you to tell her," he said, then stopped himself. "No, I will tell her. I just need 10 minutes. "Take 10 minutes. He called her. Later, Diane came into the orchard with her phone in her pocket. "He passed," she said. "I know. He asked me not to put it in the family chat until tomorrow." She waited until tomorrow. That mattered more than a speech. By the following June, the south row needed thinning again. I had posted 3 task windows on the family calendar. There were no names beside them until people added their own. At 8 in the morning, Caleb's car came up the drive. He stepped out wearing dark blue scrubs and carrying the old orchard jacket in one hand. He had finished an overnight clinical rotation and looked tired enough that I expected him to wave and go inside. Instead, he changed jackets on the porch. "Which 2 trees?" he asked. Not which trees will be mine. Not what must I learn before next year. Which 2 trees today? I pointed to the south end. Diane sat at the porch table with the schedule. Beside Caleb's name, she wrote 8 to 12 because that was what he offered. She did not copy it onto the next weekend. We worked until noon. Caleb told me about a patient who had been frightened by a mask and about the therapist who took time to explain every sound the machine made. I listened while we removed small fruit from branches that could not carry all of it well. At 12, he put down the bucket. "I need sleep." "Then go sleep." Diane packed him 2 sandwiches. She asked whether he wanted to come for supper Sunday. "I will let you know." "All right." He drove away in his scrubs. The orchard jacket lay folded on the passenger seat. Diane did not ask what his answer meant. I did not ask for next year.